I shoot typically in 4K video. That way I can export it in regular high definition.
Okay.
That lets me like crop in. I can crop into like 1/4 of the picture and still get a high definition image out of it.
I see, good.
Make sure everything is working. This is an extra microphone.
Okay. All right.
It seems to be working okay. I've got microphones in each of my video cameras. They're both running. I have a 256 gig card, so I don't have to worry about them running out. I've got shore power plugged in,
Okay.
so the batteries aren't going to go dead on me in the middle of the interview. That is still looking down at you a bit. You don't want anyone, when you're shooting interviews, you want to put the people at eye level or a little bit below eye level, because otherwise, if you're looking down on them, it makes people look small and unimportant. If you're looking up at them, it makes them look
Right.
powerful. So you want to try to get a...
Some of the pictures that Wade Highbaugh took of Floyd Collins were taken from below eye level to make him look taller. He was kind of short.
Yeah, that's one of the tricks you use in film, and I wanted people to look like real people as opposed to either demigods or pipsqueaks. Okay, well, you've been caving for quite a while, haven't you?
Yes. The first cave I was ever taken into was at age 6, and that was Mammoth Cave. My mother suggested a vacation, and I jumped up and down. And then I saved my allowance for many weeks after that to buy a flashlight, and we went to Mammoth Cave. My mother said, they have a number of tours. Which one do you think we ought to take? And I said, the all-day tour. She said, well, I don't know whether your little legs would give out on a tour like that. I said, I'll be fine, I said. So we went on the all-day tour, and I was fascinated by everything in the cave. There were no electric lights at that time, and the guide threw torches, and every other person had a kerosene lantern. And so the cave was full of dark places because the lighting was just the kerosene lanterns and the thrown torches. So my first impression of Mammoth Cave was it was very mysterious.
You talked before about your mother taking you to a cave, commercial cave in Put-in-Bay, Ohio.
Yes, that was my aunt, and I was probably 4.5 or 5 at that time. And Put-in-Bay has some unusual caves. They tend to be circular pretty much, and formed by anhydrite, which when invaded by water expands, and it pushed up domes of limestone, and then the water coming in from Lake Erie washed out the anhydrite that had expanded and made these caves. So at any rate, I remember going through them in short pants and being frustrated because the tour didn't stop for me. It just kept moving, and I wanted to see things. So that was really my first experience in a cave.
did you get, as far as I can see, there were 3 different caves at Put-in Bay that were commercialized at the time. There was a crystal cave, which is more like a bug with big calcite crystals. There's one called Perry's Cave, and there was a Mammoth Cave up there as well.
Right. And I went in all of them. And each was different. I remember the Perry's Cave was a vast single room with a lake in the middle. And I thought, gee, how can you have such a big cave in such a small island? Crystal Cave, of course, with enormous crystals of strontium sulfate, was one of a kind. I haven't seen a cave like that since, although I think other people have.
All right, let's start at the beginning. You're born on July 29th, 1929. Well, what do you remember that day?
I remember that the doctor took one look at me and slapped my mother.
There's an old rock band, Three Dog Night. They had a song, Never Been to Spain. He says, well, I've never been to heaven, but I've been to Oklahoma. They tell me I was born there, but I really don't remember.
No, I don't remember that. My earliest memories were of being in Detroit, Michigan as an infant, and I guess the first memory is being in a playpen in the yard and looking down, and my bathing suit had a net front, and I remember that. I remember going to Merrill Palmer Nursery School. I remember looking out the window and seeing a long line of men lining up in a food line. This was during the early part of the Depression. So my earliest memories are of an urban environment.
It always strikes me as odd when people have these memories of their childhood, because I don't really have any early memories. You know,
Really?
I remember we had an apartment downtown, and I remember like a scene, like a kitchen scene, and we had a curtain that separated from a little living room area, and I could just remember that picture, but I don't really remember much of anything, and that was at a young age. So you're not responsible for the stock market crash in October 1929. You know, that's not your fault.
No, I didn't know anything about that. In fact, I didn't know there was a depression going on. It never occurred to me, but I do remember vividly a lot of scenes. I remember riding in a rumble seat for the first time in an automobile, and I asked the question, what do you do in a rumble seat when it rains? And the answer I got was, well, we drive between the drops. And I thought, how in the world could you do that? It seems to me the drops are too close together. But that's a child's logic.
You tell a lot of stories about your being young. Like the one story you told before was about the climbing over the wall in the nursery school and hiding in the yard next door. Would you care to tell me?
That was Merrill Palmer Nursery School in Detroit, Michigan. They had a big playground, and at one end of the playground was a green painted board wall. And I noticed that there were cracks between the boards, and you could put your fingers through the cracks. And I found that if I put my hands at various places in these cracks, I could walk up the wall with my tennis shoes on and climb over the wall. Well, that was a startling idea, but when I got to the top of the wall, I could see that there were old building stones, giant rocks, maybe 2 feet by 3 feet and a foot thick, piled in there. I could hardly wait to get over the wall, which I did, and I found a cave, and I got in the cave, and just then one of the teachers appeared over the top of the wall and said, "Roger, you get back here right away. Don't you know that's dangerous?" Well, I didn't know it was dangerous. It was my cave and my climb, and but I do remember an early life full of adventures like that.
It's kind of funny you're talking about you're climbing over there and it's dangerous. There was a short film we had in our last short film festival. It's from Israel, and there's like this missile going over and sirens, and all the school children are told to get out of the playground and go inside, except for this one little girl who says, "Why? We've been at war as far as I remember. I want to play ball." And her teacher's like, "No, you got to go inside." And she wouldn't let her catch her to bring her inside. And eventually the other kids, "Why is she allowed outside and I'm not?" And eventually all the other kids come back outside too, and they're all playing ball while the air sirens are going off. And that story that you told about climbing over the wall just sort of reminded me of that little movie we had. It's called The Players from Israel. You told the story that when you went to Mammoth Cave, you would ask the guide where something went. And that's really, I remember that same remark from a report that talking about Matt Bransford telling a guide that about where's that passage go, and the guys, and Matt quoted in the article from like 1860 something, "It don't go nowhere, it stays right here."
That was the same message I got, and this took place at a place called the Methodist Church in Broadway in Mammoth Cave, and you're standing there looking up into the rocks, and up at the top is a passage that seems to go around the corner to the left. And then the question that I had was, where does that go? So I asked, and the guide, it seems to me, made a big deal out of it, because he said, "Little boy wants to know where the passage goes up there. It doesn't go anywhere. It stays right there." Ha, ha, ha. Everybody laughed. I said to myself, one day I'm going to find out. And of course, the first time Cave Research Foundation sent parties into Mammoth Cave, I was the head of one party, and I stopped the party and climbed to the top of the pile to see where that went. I mean, here's a lifetime of speculating about that. I went around the corner in this passage, and sure enough, it ended in a breakdown. So the guide was right, I was wrong, but my curiosity was ignited by that event.
I imagine they have these kind of responses memorized if you're a tour guide. If someone asks you a particular question, they might even be actually waiting for someone to ask the question so they can stick in their joke to light up the tour. What do you think?
I'm sure that's true. I'm sure the training of a guide is to go for the first few times as a trailer and more or less memorize and associate the jokes with the particular location in the cave, so that you can get the maximum effect out of a cave trip by entertaining at exactly the right places.
You also tell the story about your neighbor, Billy Anderson, and his clothes shoot.
Yes, when I was about 5, living in Shelby, Ohio, my mother said, "Billy Anderson lives across the street, and I'm going to take you over there and introduce you." So I said, fine, because, well, I had playmates and nobody that close, so we went across the street. Well, Billy Anderson had a nice big house, and I recall playing there several times. He was about my age. He showed me his basement. Now, in our house, we had a dug basement. It was dirt, really, and he had a regular basement. Down in the basement were wash tubs and a great pile of dirty clothes. And I looked up at the top of the pile of dirty clothes, and there was a rectangular opening in the ceiling of the basement. And I said, have you been up there? And he said, no. And I climbed the pile of dirty clothes and fitted myself into this clothes chute, actually. Well, I had, again, my tennis shoes on, so I could climb anything, Mount Everest or anything down from that. So I put one foot up in there, and I found out I could stick to the back and my feet on the other side. It's called chimneying, or stemming if you're a mountain climber. And I could work my way up. Well, I passed what looked like a door, and I figured that was on the first floor, but the chute went up, and so I went up. I pushed my way all the way up to what was the second floor. There's a door, and I pushed open the door, and there was Billy Anderson's mother sitting on the throne. She screamed, and I don't remember what happened, but I was never invited back to Billy Anderson's house.
Yeah. The color isn't real good because we've got a mixture of different lights here.
Well,
That's a lot bluer, and that's
there's a blue-white there and a warm white there.
well. I'll be able to fix it, I think.
Okay.
This light here is shining down. It just wasn't giving you enough light to look good where you were sitting. You drew cartoons about Billy Anderson and his mother.
Well, I've always drawn cartoons all my life. I enjoyed it. I've drawn a number of cave cartoons which have appeared in various newsletters. When we were training dogs, I drew a lot of dog cartoons. When we were riding bicycles, I drew a lot of bicycle cartoons. All the way through college, I drew cartoons and put them on posters advertising various events. So I've always enjoyed drawing cartoons.
You had quite a few on your website, which before you took it down.
Yes. My publicist, Fred Anderson, decided that the website could use a little artwork, and so I showed him some of those cartoons, and he put some of them on the website. So I'm always surprised when I look in there and see some of them, because they span quite a few years.
Well, your website's down now, but
I'm sorry, I said
the rogerbrucker.com website isn't there anymore.
it isn't?
No.
I didn't know that. I think I've been paying for it for year after year.
Well, it wasn't there when I looked for it.
Well, maybe it isn't.
I found your copy of your old website on the Wayback Machine, the
Oh,
Internet Archives Wayback Machine. So
okay.
I basically seen all your website again, but it wasn't active.
Okay.
Tell me about your Aunt Margaretta Brucker.
My aunt, who is my father's sister, older sister, lived in Shelby, Ohio, and I used to go up to her house, and she was an author. And I remember when her first book came out, which was called Death in the Dormitory. It was a murder mystery, and she had a writing set up in the back bedroom of her house where she and her mother lived, and in the bedroom she had a card table set up with a portable typewriter and a ream of yellow paper, and she wrote a chapter a day, and at the end of the day she would mark it up with red ink, and the following morning a typist would appear and she would hand the chapter to the typist, who would hand back a finished typing of the previous day's chapter, which she would then mark up again. I think I learned the value of rigorous editing from watching my aunt ruthlessly attack a manuscript with a red pencil and mark it all up and improve it. But I decided it would be fun to be a writer, and I've always liked to write, and she encouraged me to write. But she wrote perhaps 15 books, starting with murder mysteries. The second one was called Poison Party. Then she began to write romance books, and she wrote nurse books, and she wrote a historical novel, which was never published. But I thought she was A1 in terms of her writing skill, particularly since she was never married. As far as I know, she was never a murderer, but she could imagine all sorts of things, and I emulated her.
There's a web page about her on the Shelby County, whatever.
Shelby, Ohio.
Website.
Yes.
There's a picture of her and a picture of what I take to be her house on the website.
Yes. The house was on Marvin Avenue, and I mowed the lawn for several years. I think I got 35 cents or something for mowing the lawn.
Well, that seems reasonable.
What's that?
That seems reasonable. Well, when I was a kid, my dad wanted to give me like $2 to mow this lawn, for example. And he says, well, I used to do it for a quarter. He says, well, for a quarter you go see 2 Saturday matinees. So if you pay me what 2 Saturday matinees cost, I'll be happy to mow that lawn.
Well, growing up, I never lacked for money. I learned to clean wallpaper at a very early age. At this time, almost all houses were heated with coal. And so the wallpaper would get covered with soot in many houses. And you could buy at the grocery store a can of wallpaper cleaner. But nobody liked to do that. And I learned to clean wallpaper very efficiently, and so I had plenty of money from cleaning wallpaper. I found the secret of making a lot of money was people would say, well, how much are you going to charge me for this? And I said, well, I work for 65 cents an hour. I said, well, what will you charge to do the whole room? And that's where I'd make the money, because I knew exactly how long it was going to take to do the room, and so I doubled it. And that way I got a lot of money.
Well, I always would end up mowing the lawns anyway, whether I got paid or not, but I'd like to give them a hard time about it. You were in the Boy Scouts.
Yes, I was in the Cub Scouts first, and then later on, when I was 12, I joined the Boy Scouts, and we had Troop 3, which met in the basement of the Methodist Church. We went to camping events in several cities, and I recall learning a lot about outdoor things. I learned to signal with semaphore flags as one of the requirements to become a first-class scout. I worked my way up to Star Scout, which you could get with 5 merit badges. About that time I discovered girls.
Well, I was in the Boy Scouts too, so at some point you decided to go to college.
Yes.
And you went to Oberlin.
Yes.
And tell me about why you went to Oberlin and what you studied there.
I went to Oberlin because everybody in my family went to Oberlin. My mother, graduated in 1923. My Uncle John graduated from Oberlin, and I was told about a long string of cousins and relatives and grandparents and so on who went to Oberlin. And I was taken up there for illumination night before the graduation, which was a time when alumni would meet together informally on the Tappan Square. So I recall these Japanese lanterns lighting up this square at night. So I didn't know anything about any other college at all. So when it came time to apply, my mother gave me the address of the admissions office of Oberlin, and I wrote him a letter and got back an acceptance immediately. No requirements, nothing. So that was how I got to Oberlin. I took a number of liberal arts courses. There are many requirements you have to take, but I took several art courses, and I decided that the thing to major in was fine art, drawing, and painting. Because I could do that, everybody else at Oberlin was smarter than I was. They had gone to Eastern schools, they had studied for the qualification tests, and I hadn't done that. I went through grade school never taking anything home. I did all the work at school. So when I got there, I wasn't used to everybody else being smarter than I was. But if I majored in art, I could draw about as well as some people. Not as well as everybody, but at any rate, I took art, and I graduated as an art major. I did take a lot of writing courses, however, and I liked to write. I found out after I graduated that I was really a storyteller and liked to tell stories both visually and in words. And so my interest in communication has always been very high, and has certainly kindled at Oberlin.
When did you graduate from Oberlin?
I graduated in 1951. The Korean War was on at that time. I had